John hastily put his smartphone into his pants pocket. Suddenly, Emma said to John with a serious face, "Why did you bury a baby in the mountains, John?" Upon hearing those words from Emma, both I and Helen were lost for words and looked at Emma. "Huh?" John's face turned pale. "Emma, what are you talking about?" "It's about the baby on your smartphone." Emma looked straight at John and said, "Hey, John, show me the picture on your phone again." John, as Emma's request, pulled out his phone and showed her a camping photo. No, not this one." Saying that, Emma snatched the smartphone from John and started looking at a different photo, unable to process what was happening in that moment. John exclaimed "Ah," and reached out to take back the phone from Emma. Emma pushed John's hand away and showed the screen displaying the found photo to me and Helen. The photo showed a young woman unknown to both of us. "No, you got it wrong. She approached me. She said she had a problem at work and wanted my advice." John claimed he had been kindly helping the woman. Emma's mysterious ability revealed John's hidden side to me. Lately, John had been staring at his smartphone until late at night and coming home increasingly later, and I deduced that this was the reason. I decided to have John take me to the mountain where he said the baby was buried. I dug the baby up from the ground, held it in my arms, and later visited John's workplace. "My name is Ava. I'm 29 years old. It's almost been a year since John and I got married. John is also 29, a salaryman. We both work and spend our busy days together. We don't have children yet. A mutual friend introduced us. We dated for several years and finally got married last year. The wedding, blessed by our parents and dear friends, was truly moving. My sister Helen lives about 20 minutes by car from the apartment where we live. Helen, 3 years my senior at 32, is married and has a 5-year-old daughter named Emma. They purchased a standalone house and the whole family lives there. I adore my niece, Emma, and she is fond of me, calling me Ava. One day, when I visited Helen and Emma, Emma suddenly said something to me. "I've heard your voice, Ava, when I was in Mom's belly." Really? I was surprised by what Emma said. "You remember being in your mom's belly, Emma?" "Yes." I could hear both Mom's and Dad's voices. Emma said with a serious expression. I had heard that some young children remember their time in the womb. But this was the first time I heard such a story in reality. When I shared this with Helen, she responded, "Yes, she sometimes tells me about it. It's surprising, isn't it? It's really fascinating that such things actually happen." Helen shared more such episodes with me, seeing my surprise. And it's not just mysterious. The other day, when I lost something and was searching for it, Emma suddenly told me where it was. There's no way Emma could have seen where I put it, but it was strange. Even though I thought it was impossible, when I checked the place Emma mentioned, I actually found it there. Really? Can something like that happen? And I can hardly believe it myself, but it really happened. I think maybe Emma has some mysterious power," Helen said with a serious look in her eyes. Meanwhile, Emma was playing innocently a little distance away from us. I had heard about it, but I wondered if young children really had some mysterious powers while watching Emma. Time passed after hearing such mysterious stories. Recently, John's return home started getting later and later. Firstly, I thought he was just busy at work, but recently he often came home after midnight. It had me worried. One night, as John came home late and headed straight for the shower, I spoke up. "You've been working late a lot lately, haven't you?" "My job role has changed a bit. There are many things I'm not used to, so it's taking me longer." Saying that, John closed the door to take his shower. After a quick shower, he came out. I had made dinner for him thinking he might be hungry, but he declined, saying he wasn't very hungry. "All right, go rest then." Okay, good night. I had work the next day, so I decided to go to bed. I was concerned about John and thought he would go to sleep soon since he seemed so tired. However, hours passed after I went to bed, and John didn't come to the bedroom. Feeling a strange unease, I quietly went to see what he was doing in the living room. Peeking in, I saw John was sitting in the dark, staring at his smartphone. Judging by the way his fingers moved in the light of the smartphone, he was likely fiddling with something. He kept playing with his smartphone, grinning all the while. Despite looking utterly exhausted earlier, what could he possibly be doing now? Maybe he's messaging someone, but who could it be at this hour? Watching John made me more and more anxious. However, because he looked so happy, I didn't have the courage to address him. Making sure not to be found, I quietly returned to the bedroom. Hey, how about going camping together during the upcoming holiday? I suggested the holiday plans to John. Camping on the holiday? Lately, due to our busy schedules, we haven't been going out, even on weekends. When we were newlyweds, we'd often go on trips or dine out during weekends. However, that has changed recently. I felt the need for some quality time, just the two of us, in a serene location. What if we go to a campsite, cook outdoors, and have a bonfire? Since it's in the mountains, I'm sure the night sky is beautiful. Doesn't that sound like a perfect day off? Well, I guess so. Though his reply sounded unenthusiastic, he didn't reject the idea outright, so I pressed on. Even if he was reluctant now, I believed we'd have a great time once we got there. If you say so, we'd use the car for camping, right? Our car might not fit all the camping gear. John was right. Our compact car wasn't suitable for camping. I thought of asking Helen, as her car might be better suited. A few days later, I visited Helen's house and consulted her about borrowing her car. I don't mind at all. If you're going camping, you should use our tent as well. Helen seemed delighted to hear about our camping plans and happily agreed. Her family car is a spacious 7-seater, ample room for camping gear. Plus, it's reliable for mountain roads. I felt joy imagining our camping trip. Thank you. Now we can go camping without worries. It's been a while since we went out together, hasn't it? Have fun. Hearing my conversation with Helen, a young girl named Emma approached and said, I'm jealous. Camping. I want to go with you too. Or I'd love to go with you too. Let's go together next time. Finally, the day before our 2-night, 3-day camping trip arrived. After work, I stopped by Helen's house to borrow her car, then headed home. The next day, John and I loaded our gear into the car and set off for our camping adventure. Being in nature after such a long time seemed to wash away my daily worries, and I felt completely refreshed. Since arriving in the mountains, John had been showing the kind of smile he used to have before his busy days. I could tell he was enjoying it. I was a bit concerned because he had seemed somewhat reluctant initially, but I was glad I persuaded him to come. As we talked, I genuinely felt this way. However, late at night, while I thought John was sleeping beside me, he sat up and began using his smartphone. I noticed, but pretended to be asleep. He continued using his phone for about 2 hours. He was probably messaging someone. The same thing happened the second night. On the final day, we returned home from the campsite. It was already 4 p.m. When are we supposed to return the car? She said there was no rush, so I was thinking of returning it tomorrow. Hearing my response, John clearly looked pleased. Oh really? Then, can I use the car for a bit? Sure. Why not? I hadn't expected John to say something like that. Especially after returning from an unfamiliar camping trip. He must have been tired. Since we have this big car, I wanted to invite some local friends and go out with a big group just once. Local friends. Just don't drink, okay? There's no way I'm going to drink. Alright, but what time are you planning to come back? I'll be back before the date changes. It's a precious day off, so it's okay to hang out with friends once in a while, right? John seemed so eager to go that I agreed. Having received approval, John cheerfully left in the car. Considering it was a long weekend, I wondered if other guys have their own schedules and would be willing to go out on such short notice. Despite a bit of doubt, I ended up spending the last night of the long weekend alone at home. Just before the date changed, John returned, and I kept my promise and came back before the date changed, right? And, of course, I didn't drink. He said this immediately upon returning and seeing me, and then began using his smartphone again. Do you know, John, you've been looking at your phone a lot more recently? I told John without hiding my sulky demeanor, and I just separated from everyone, so we're all excited about today's events. With that response, John took his smartphone with him into the bathroom. The next day, John and I went to Helen's house to return the car and the tent. When we gave the cute souvenir that we had bought thinking of little Emma, she seemed very happy. John and I stayed at Helen's, enjoying some coffee she offered. John, who had played with Emma several times, seemed to make her very happy. Since Helen referred to my husband as John, Emma had started calling him that as well. John and Emma were playing joyfully a little distance from us. John, who was fond of Emma, interacted with her with a smile. Emma seemed to have asked John to show her pictures from the camping trip, and John was showing her the photos he had taken with his smartphone. Helen and I were having an animated conversation about the camping trip. And it's great that the weather was good, isn't it? Did you enjoy camping? It was fun. Thanks to your car and tent. Thank you. No. You can't touch it without permission. This is it, John suddenly shouted loudly at Emma, taking back the smartphone she was holding. It seems Emma knew how to use a smartphone and was operating John's smartphone screen. You shouldn't touch John's phone without permission, Emma. Why? I was just looking at the photos on John's phone, she complained, looking dissatisfied, as if she wanted to touch it more. John, flustered, quickly put the smartphone back in his pocket. Then, Emma suddenly turned to John with a serious expression. Why did you bury a baby in the mountains? Hearing Emma's words, both Helen and I were left speechless, and we looked at Emma. Huh? John's face turned pale. Huh, Emma? What are you talking about? John responded to Emma with obvious agitation. I'm talking about the baby on John's phone. She looked straight at John and said so. Hey John, show me the pictures on your phone again. John, prompted by Emma, took out his smartphone and showed Emma the pictures from the camping trip. No, not this one. Emma said that and took John's smartphone from him, starting to look at different pictures. John, unable to react in time to the sudden movement, exclaimed, and quickly reached out to retrieve the smartphone from Emma. She brushed John's hand aside and showed the screen displaying a photo to Helen and me. In that photo, there was an image of a young woman I had never seen before. She was smiling and holding a large stuffed baby in her arms, with what seemed to be a UFO catcher machine in the background. Who is this person? I asked John, nonchalantly. John frantically tried to take the smartphone back from Emma. However, Emma evaded him and handed me the phone, so I slid through the screen. As I looked through the photos one by one, I found a selfie of the young woman from earlier and John, looking friendly together. Upon closer examination, it seemed like the photo was taken inside a car. The color of the seats and the overall interior suggested it was probably the car borrowed from Helen. They seemed to have taken the photo while lying down together in the back seat with it folded flat. John's gaze was shifting nervously. He had turned pale, and sweat was forming on his forehead. Concerned, Helen leaned over to look at my face, showing signs of worry. Just then, my brother-in-law came home from work. I wanted to question John about the woman right away, but I couldn't do it with Emma and my brother-in-law present. Helen seemed to understand my feelings and quickly explained the situation to my brother-in-law, who then took Emma and moved to another room. In the room that remained, John, Helen, and I moved to a different room on the second floor, closed the door, and began to continue our conversation. So, who is the woman in that photo? Even when asked, John hesitated to answer clearly. However, Helen and I didn't intend to let John off the hook so easily, and we continued to press him until John finally spoke the truth. The woman in that photo was named Mia, and she was a junior colleague at John's workplace. She was still 23 years old, and she had just joined the company as a new employee in April of this year. John had been having an affair with this young woman. The shocking revelation left me feeling as if I might faint. No, it's not like that. She approached me first. She said she was having trouble at work and wanted me to help her with her problems. You have the message history with that girl, right? Show it to me. John seemed flustered by Helen's sudden request. Message history? Well, that's also the other person's privacy. It's a bit, you know. She's the one you had an affair with, right? I'm your relative, so I want to see the evidence. Of course, your wife, Ava, also has that right. Despite John's strong resistance, Helen continued to persuade him with a determined stance. Eventually, John gave in and reluctantly handed his smartphone to Helen. On John's phone, there was a substantial amount of message exchanges with Mia. Within a single day, the two of them exchanged sweet words like newly dating lovers multiple times. Among them, one particular day's conversation shocked me. It was the message history from the late night John went out in Helen's borrowed car after returning from camping. Thank you for today. We had a great time together. I'm sorry it was such a short time, but I was really happy to see you, Mia. Being able to cuddle in such a big car with John made me happy. Me too. I wanted to be with you, Mia. So I somehow managed to sneak out of the house. By the way, I buried the baby plushie we won today in the mountains. Was that cruel? It can't be helped. Let's wait until I marry John. Yo, let's do that. We'll have to dig it up together once we get married. Let's do it. It feels like a time capsule, and I'm looking forward to it. But when do you think that'll happen? I'll try to make it happen as soon as possible, without making you wait too long. I'm looking forward to having our baby together after we get married. I believe in you, John. Reading that series of exchanges left my mind in a state of shock. What's this? John, sweating profusely and looking down, seemed unable to explain. John, you'll have to explain everything. It seems like John has run out of options and reluctantly started talking about Mia. At first, Mia consulted John about her worries, and they began going out for meals more often. Since it was after work, they ended up getting home late, so John would drop Mia off at her place. Unable to go inside Mia's house because she lived with her parents, they would park the car near her home, stop at a coin parking lot, and spend time talking in the car, just the two of them. As they continued these days, they became closer and eventually developed a romantic relationship. On the day they returned from camping, John was desperate to have a drive date with Mia in Helen's borrowed car, so he lied to me and went on a date with Mia. After they met up, they stopped by an arcade on the way during their drive. There, Mia said she wanted that big baby plushie, so John won it from a UFO catcher machine. Holding this plushie feels like there's a baby between us, like we're a married couple. Holding the plushie she had won, Mia said this with a happy expression. Then, they made a promise. let's bury this plushie in the mountains like a time capsule until the day we become a married couple. When the day comes for us to get married, we'll come back here together and dig up the plushie while reminiscing about this day." They prepared a large plastic bag, placed the plushie inside, and went to a mountain not far from where they had stopped the car while they were still cuddling. Conveniently, the car they used for the camping trip had shovels and such on board, so they were able to proceed with their plans smoothly. What's that? Upon hearing this story, I, even as his wife, couldn't help but be appalled. Helen, who had been quite energetic until a moment ago, also froze upon hearing it. Burying a baby-shaped plushie was an incredibly poor taste and made me feel uncomfortable. What was especially shocking was that both John and Mia were apparently considering marriage. John even talked to Mia about wanting her to give birth to his child once they were married. John had repeatedly claimed in their short exchanges that Mia was the one initiating everything, but his words and actions were more than enough to lead her on. Realizing this made my heart heavy. John and I had been married only for a year, and we didn't even have children yet. However, John had gone as far as making a promise of marriage with a young woman who had just entered the workforce and even discussed having their own baby. In front of John and Helen, I completely broke down in tears. Helen gently approached me and comforted me by patting my back. On the other hand, John, upon seeing me like this, seemed flustered and lost. By the way, isn't Emma quite unusual? How did she figure out that John buried a baby plushie in the mountains just from looking at a photo on his phone? After crying for quite some time and feeling a bit relieved, I suddenly voiced this curiosity. It really is strange. Maybe Emma has some kind of mysterious power after all. John, while listening to this conversation, still seemed puzzled and couldn't fully grasp it. However, in this atmosphere, he didn't have the courage to ask for more details and slumped his shoulders, looking down again. We had been at Helen's house for a long time, so John and I decided to return home. As soon as we got home, John and I sat down face to face, ready to continue our conversation. "We've only been married for a year. How could you do something like this?" I said this in a low voice, glaring at John. "And I'm sorry, but I didn't intend for things to turn out this way. It's not like I actively pursued this. If I hadn't been invited like that." "You can't say something like that. Weren't you at least somewhat tempted by a younger woman seeking your help?" Watching John still trying to come up with excuses to protect himself, I was getting increasingly frustrated. "Both you and that woman are truly the worst. She knew that you've already married. That girl was going through a tough time at work, and it was a challenging period for her." Hearing John defending Mia like that only made me angrier. Just because she was having a tough time, John, you had to console her by driving around and discussing things while being intimate in the car? Acting like her senior? I've been struggling all this time too, and your late returns home kept increasing. And even when you came back, you were always glued to your phone. I pretended not to notice, but I knew all along. Conversations that continued until dawn with someone else. I raised my voice and said this to John. John looked down again and remained silent. "Anyway, we're going to tell my parents and John's parents about this." After I regained my composure and said those words, John began to panic. "You're going to tell our parents?" "Of course. My older sister already knows, so it's only a matter of time. Besides, we can't hide something this important, can we?" I then proceeded to inform both of our parents about John's infidelity. As soon as we finished talking, both parents rushed to our house and began questioning John. "You, after being married for only a year, you're cheating. What were you thinking? Unbelievable. So the vows you made at the wedding were just for show? You promised us that you'd make Ava happy while crying, to betray her soon." Both parents berated John fiercely. John's parents were even more furious. "You're really an utterly foolish son. You're a disgrace to our family. To do something so shameful and apologize to Ava and her parents. It's unforgivable, Ava. I'm truly sorry. John, I will never allow you to associate with us again. John's parents repeatedly bowed their heads to me and my parents, apologizing profusely. John, what are you spacing out for? You should be the one apologizing the most. John was forced to kneel down as John's father held his head. I'm truly sorry. After being scolded from all sides, John finally broke down in tears and apologized. Even though you have such a wonderful wife, we're cutting ties with you. After a while, everyone left. John, who had been scolded relentlessly, seemed to have lost the will to stand and sat down, hanging his head. Please divorce me, I told John firmly. Of course, John, you have that girl, Mina, who you're planning a future with, right? You want a baby with her, don't you? We'll get divorced just as you both wish. I yelled at John louder than I had anticipated. Wait a minute. It's true that I exchanged messages with Mia about marriage and having a child, but it was just a spur-of-the-moment thing, not my true feelings. I only said things that would make Mina happy in the heat of the moment. I really love only you, Ava. John desperately said that to me with a pleading expression. This makes me more determined to get a divorce. John, you're truly the worst. When I calmly responded, John seemed bewildered. Did he really think that I would be happy to hear those words? After all this, I can't trust you anymore. I'm getting a divorce. I said this with a cold gaze directed at John. Ava, please, just reconsider one more time. I really don't want to marry Mia. It was just a casual thing with her, despite betraying me so spectacularly. John was now making desperate attempts to change my mind. I responded to him this way. There was a place where you buried a stuffed animal, right? Can you take me there? To that place? After the long weekend, the world returned to its usual weekday routine, and John went to work. Originally, I had plans to go to work as well, but on this day, I decided to take the day off and contacted my company. Excuse me for the sudden visit. My husband has always been in your care, I greeted loudly while bowing deeply, entering a building in the office district. John's workplace was located there. Everyone present was surprised by my voice, and as they turned their attention toward me, they continued to watch. It was natural because I was carrying a stuffed animal covered in dirt in my arms. Since such a person suddenly appeared, the employees in the area were frozen, looking at me. With each step I took, dirt from the stuffed animal fell onto the floor. Ava, John, who had found me, approached with a drained expression. Last night, I had guided John to the mountain where he had buried the stuffed animal. I had him dig it up. He must have buried it carefully in a large bag, but while digging it up, the shovel accidentally hit the bag, tearing it open, and the stuffed animal ended up covered in dirt. Staring at that stuffed animal, I had spent the entire night thinking of a way to get revenge on the two of them. Then, I came up with a plan to bring this dirt-covered stuffed animal to the office. John obviously never expected me to show up at work, and he seemed flustered, unable to find words. My husband is having an affair with a coworker, Mia, I exclaimed loudly, and upon hearing this, all the employees turned their attention to one particular woman. The focus of their gazes was Mia, John's mistress. Mia, taken aback by this unexpected turn of events, appeared nervous and turned pale as she hung her head. This stuffed animal was buried in the mountains by the two of them. They promised to dig it up together after my husband and I divorced, and they got married. That's what I've been told. As I explained, the office erupted in murmurs. What's going on? I can't believe it. Isn't this creepy? It's like a horror story. Scary. They expressed their shock one after another. Despite making such a promise, I don't understand why my husband is saying these things to me. Why is he saying this when he's having an affair with Mina while having a family at home? I shouted, playing a video on my smartphone with the volume turned up. Ava, please, just reconsider one more time. I really don't want to marry Mia. It was just a casual affair with her. After the video ended, Mia, who had been looking down all this time, raised her head with intense anger displayed on her face. John, what's going on here? What do you mean by a casual thing? Mia, it's not like that. This is the trap between Mia and me. John seemed even more disconcerted, struggling to find words. We're already emotionally detached, and the divorce is in progress, right? You've been telling me that once we're separated, you want to marry me right away. You've said it multiple times, that you want me to have your child. Mia yelled at John with her emotions laid bare, causing the surrounding employees to murmur as they looked at John. I'll return the favor now. Covered in dirt, I handed the dirty stuffed animal to Mia. Then, I presented divorce papers right in front of John. A marriage with such a scumbag. I'll have you divorced right away. Sign here, right now. Overwhelmed by the sudden, tumultuous events and seemingly not inclined to resist, John obediently signed the papers. I apologize for causing a disturbance in your busy workplace. I will no longer be involved, so I will take my leave. I deeply bowed to the tumultuous surrounding employees, then turned to face John and Mia, saying this: You've got what you wanted. I wish you both a lifetime of happiness. With just those words left behind, I left John's workplace, brushing off the dirt on my clothes with my hand. Afterward, John and Mia were summoned by their superiors and questioned, admitting to their affair. Now that the truth had come out, to avoid damaging the company's image, both of them were fired. Mia, who had been told it was just a fling, was deeply angry with John. Fueled by her intense anger, she didn't back down and instead grew even stronger. Although I left the apartment I had shared with John immediately, Mia came in forcibly and started cohabitating with him. Mia threatened John, saying, "After betraying me like this, I won't forgive you. If you don't watch out, you never know what I might do." John felt he had no choice but to obey Mia, who had become increasingly unhinged. John, who was in the midst of job hunting after being let go from his previous job, seemed to have his options limited by Mia, who declared, "I won't allow you to work in a job that involves talking to other women." John was trapped in an environment with Mia nearby and appeared to be at his wit's end. But he felt that leaving the crazed Mia alone might put him in danger. In the end, John had to do physical labor at a construction site with no female company, struggling to make ends meet while using up his strength to the limit every day. Mia continued to doubt him, meticulously tracking his actions by checking her smartphone every day and keeping him under her control. She probably realized that John was distancing himself from her and couldn't bear the thought of another woman taking him away, just like she did. With the mortgage for the apartment, living expenses, and the added burden of paying me alimony, John found himself in a financially and mentally tight spot. Of course, I had also demanded alimony from Mia, so she had no choice but to work to make payments. She had taken multiple part-time jobs but hadn't been able to hold on to any of them for long. And she had been jumping from one part-time job to another. Since the alimony claims were being handled through lawyers, the lawyer had been meeting with John regularly to keep me updated on their situation. After my divorce, I had moved back to my parents' home, which wasn't far from my workplace, so my daily life remained largely unchanged, except for the fact that I was no longer married. Living with my parents allowed me to see them more frequently, and I also had the opportunity to spend time with Helen and Emma. Helen genuinely worried about me and cared for me. "Ava, you did nothing wrong. You're still young. So let's forget about this and look for a new opportunity. You're right. But looking back, breaking up with that awful man was the best thing that could have happened. It must have been thanks to Emma's mysterious power. By that time, I genuinely felt that way. I had been deeply hurt and had my moments of distress. But I thought it was fortunate that I had realized early on that he was a terrible person and was able to divorce him. Thanks to Emma's words, I was able to see through it. Emma was my savior. I hope to meet a sincere person someday and get married again. Then, I won't have children and raise them. I believe that day will come. So for now, I'll work and save money for the future. With these positive thoughts in mind, I live each day with a bright outlook.